The sun was dying over the plains, melting into a horizon painted in fire and dust. Every breath of wind dragged the scent of blood, iron, and desperation across the ranch yard. Silas Kane, a weathered rancher with eyes that had seen too many graves and too few miracles, stood alone, his boots sinking into the parched earth. His revolver hung loose at his side, hand trembling not from fear, but from the weight of what he knew was coming. Before him, tied to the hanging post, stood the outlaw they called the Devil's Stare. The man's name had been whispered from town to town, riding on the lips of terrified travelers and bounty hunters who never came back. His real name was Jeb Crow, a man Silas once called a brother. The outlaw's face was carved from pain and shadow, his smile cracked but defiant even now, as if he welcomed the rope that would soon greet his neck. "Please, just make it quick," Jeb said, voice rough like gravel in a dry riverbed. His words cut through the still air, each syllable soaked in regret and something darker. Acceptance. Silas's throat tightened. He had dreamed of this moment for years. The day he'd finally catch the man who burned his barn, stole his horses, and left his wife to die in the fire. But now, with Jeb standing there, bound and beaten, Silas felt the fight draining out of him. The world wasn't black and white anymore. It was dust and smoke, blood and sorrow. The townsfolk had gathered at a distance, silent, watching as the last light faded behind the wooden gallows. They wanted justice or maybe vengeance, but none of them truly understood. Silas had ridden across hell to find this man, not for bounty, not for glory, but for peace. And now, standing this close, he realized peace had never been part of the deal. "You took everything from me," Silas growled, though his voice cracked halfway through. Jeb's eyes, pale and empty as a winter sky, lifted to meet his. "I gave you a reason to live," he rasped. The words hit harder than a bullet. For a heartbeat, Silas saw it all again. The fire, the screams, the hollow silence afterward. He'd lived every day chasing the ghost of revenge. But what happens when that ghost is finally caught? The answer lay right there before him, breathing, broken, still human. "Do it, Kane," one of the townsmen called out. "He deserves it." The others murmured in agreement, their eyes hungry for closure. But Silas wasn't sure whose closure they wanted, his or their own. The desert wind picked up, carrying a whistle that felt like a warning from something older than time itself. The Devil's Stare didn't flinch. He looked straight into Silas's eyes. And for the first time in years, Silas saw not the devil, but a man beaten by his own demons. "We both burned that night," Jeb said quietly. "You just lived long enough to see it." Silas lifted his revolver. His fingers curled tight around the trigger, sweat stinging his palms. The sunset painted his face with blood-red light, and for a fleeting second, he wondered if this was what redemption looked like. Ugly, lonely, and bathed in dying light. The hammer clicked back. Silence. Not even the wind dared to move. Then from somewhere deep inside came a voice that wasn't his own. Maybe it was God, maybe it was guilt, but it whispered, "Let it go." The barrel trembled. Jeb closed his eyes, ready for the end. But the shot never came. Instead, Silas turned, threw his revolver into the dust, and walked away. Every step felt heavier than the last, like dragging his soul through the mud. The crowd stared in disbelief, unsure whether to cheer or curse. One boy, barely old enough to shave, whispered, "He spared the devil." But Silas heard none of it. He climbed onto his horse, the leather creaking beneath him, and looked back one last time. Jeb Crow stood there in the fading light, eyes open, still alive, still staring. Maybe that was punishment enough, to live with what he'd done. Silas rode off toward the horizon where the sky swallowed the sun whole. Behind him, the wind howled through the ranch like a ghost mourning the end of an old tale. But for Silas, it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new kind of pain, one born from mercy. Sometimes, he thought, it takes more courage to forgive than to kill. The desert stretched endlessly before him, each mile a reminder that the past never truly dies. It just follows quietly, waiting for the next reckoning. As the credits of the story fade in your mind's eye, remember this: every scar, every loss, every choice shapes who we become. And in the Wild West, where law and faith walk hand in hand with death, mercy might just be the rarest form of justice. If this story struck your heart, if it made you feel the dust, the pain and the redemption of a true cowboy's soul, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Wild West Stories. Every week we ride deeper into tales of courage, betrayal, and redemption across the frontier. Join the ride, saddle up, and hit that bell icon, because the next story might just change how you see the West. Forever.